up to the release of Christopher Nolan's TENET, which has actually already opened in parts of the world, I'm reviewing each of Christopher Nolan's movies in release order. Today we're talking about The Dark Knight Rises. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your take on The Dark Knight Rises, Christopher Nolan's ambitious conclusion to his Dark Knight trilogy that has kind of divided audiences on the internet as to exactly how they feel on this one. I'd love to hear your take down below in the comment section, and this is a spoiler review, so you can talk spoilers down below in the comment section and don't feel the need to put spoiler warnings. One final thing before we get started. I'm seeing TENET on Monday. My review for TENET will come out on Tuesday. There's no possible way I'm going to be able to review Interstellar and Dunkirk before then. I don't know when I will review them. I'm not sure what that will look like, but it will not be before I review TENET. With the way the universe has played out with the delayed releases, it threw my schedule off, so it's not going to happen on time, unfortunately, but I will have a ranking shortly afterwards. I will have watched the movies for the purposes of that ranking, and you can hear my thoughts on them. With that said, let's get started talking about the good. And probably the best thing about this movie for me is that it just feels incredibly large in scope, scale, and size. Whether from the nature of the story and the consequences for the city of Gotham, that the whole thing is under siege, that the fact that it takes place over the span of months, that we're seeing Bruce Wayne 7 years later in a very different point in time in his life, to the consequences of everything that happens in the final 10 minutes. It's a movie that's very large in scale in what it shows and what it's attempting to accomplish. It feels like a proper use of the word epic without needing to bring in aliens or sky beams. It keeps the grounded nature of the franchise in general, but it adds on top, like it keeps adding these layers of complexity of what's happening in the city and the threat to it in a way that feels like a logical continuation of what happened in The Dark Knight. In each of the movies, Gotham is held captive. In one of them, it's really kind of tied to one part of the city that kind of goes bananas. And if the train gets to the core, the whole city's go bananas, but it's kind of limited in this one. Then the second one, you feel the threat of the Joker's attack on Gotham, and everyone's in danger, but it's never actually at a point in time where everybody could actually die. This one continues it and gets to a point in time where legitimately this city has been closed off on this island. They're taking heavily influence from the No Man's Land comic book series, doing a different version of it as Nolan did with all of his stories. And then, I mean, you have the fact that they're shut off is just interesting. The prisoners have been let out. There's a bomb that they don't necessarily know about, but Bruce Wayne knows about. And there's the threat of to the rest of the world as to why they can't come in, why people can't leave. This terrorism that actually could kill everybody. And so you just see the escalation that has been this theme of this whole series, is how does it get bigger and bigger and bigger? And this movie just takes all of that to the logical conclusions. Things really have stakes right out of the gate. It establishes that we're 7 years later, and what happened in The Dark Knight took an emotional toll on Bruce Wayne. It took an emotional toll on Commissioner Gordon. Everything that happened to Bruce Wayne as his time as Batman, as well as falling off in what happened with Harvey, has left him physically damaged. And then as you go into the movie, a physically damaged, emotionally weak Batman tries to fight Bane. It does not go well for him. And because the movie is taking place over so much time, you have this story of a broken bat having to come back. But all of it, you feel it. It matters. There's a weight to it. There's consequences of actions. And even so much so that when it does kind of the final little montage in the last 2-3 minutes, and you have Alfred just, I failed you, I'm sorry. Like, you feel that. It is devastating when that happens because it's done such a good job of showing you that things matter in this world and there's stakes to everything. It also does a really nice job of bookending the original film and feeling like a true trilogy, to where each piece matters, plays its part in this story told over 3 parts, and it comes to a conclusion. The threat in this film ties back to the origins of Batman. The actions in the middle piece are played out here. They have consequences and set the stage for the story that's told at this point in time. And so, some trilogies just feel like 3 separate stories with loose things tying them together. This properly completes a story. That's where even some people are like, do you think that they'll get Christian Bale to come back? Do you want them to do a 4th movie? No. Do you want him to show up in Justice League? Do you think Justice League would have been better if Christian Bale had been in it? No. Because this is the story it was designed to be. The universe was built for this set of movies, with this set of rules, that it would come to a conclusion and play out the story. So if you bring him back, it doesn't feel right unless like a lot of time has passed or something like that. It just would feel weird. And him showing up in Justice League or having Superman show up in Christopher Nolan's Batman would violate the rules of the universe. As we've talked about many times in the previous reviews, Christopher Nolan's premise for his Batman was, what if you had an ordinary world with these extraordinary characters? That was his premise. And so as soon as you bring in Superman, time travel, multiverse, or anything like that, it compromises the integrity of this trilogy. And so it did a really nice job of actually closing it out based off the rules that it set, the way it defined this version of Bruce Wayne, what he was trying to do. He wanted to save the city, but even at the very beginning of The Dark Knight, he's trying to find a way to retire. And through the course of this trilogy, it closes out with a bookend. Moving along to the characters in this one, I really dug Bane. I thought that this was a very weird, alternate, Nolanized version of Bane that worked. And sure, the character got compromised a little bit with how the last couple of things that happen with him. It's like he's a really strong villain until we get to his final moments, and the way they described his relation to Talia, I think definitely compromised him a little bit, and then he just gets taken out haphazardly by Catwoman. You're like, what? After all of this, that's what you do? What? And you make it play it as a joke? Not necessarily the best idea there. But up to that point in time, the way he talks, the accent, the phraseology of everything's kind of said in this poetic manner that's quotable and great lines for a trailer. All of that stuff worked for me. That he's a very thick built Bane, but he doesn't look like an underwear model. He doesn't look like a bodybuilder. He looks like a guy that just wants to be able to rip people's arms off. And so he is just a dirty bulked it up so that he could just be vicious and on people. I think that fits the character more so than some other approach they could have gone with it. And Tom Hardy himself is not actually a big guy. He's only like 5'9", and they did a really good job of still making him the biggest guy in the room. Just looks so imposing on screen with the way they shot him, and with him just having this dirty bulk up that it works. He can pull off being Bane while being multiple inches short of 6 feet tall and being like 4 inches shorter than Christian Bale. It still worked pretty well on screen. Then we got Catwoman. And I thought this was a very solid version of the character for this universe, where she is the cat burglar. She's involved in some of that stuff, but she has that connection to Bruce Wayne. She's not all bad. She's just cares about herself more than she cares about other people. And I think they pulled it off pretty well. And of all 3 of these movies, she gets the best fight moves. Like with Batman, they're like, we want to make sure it's grounded. Batman wouldn't be throwing a flippy kick when he could just throw an elbow and take a guy out. And so I haven't really liked the fight choreography in any of these movies, as I've well documented throughout this review series. And then you get to this movie, and they have Catwoman in high heels throwing flippy kicks and spin kicks and stuff like that, doing actually cool choreography. So it's like they abandoned all of the stuff they said. But then Batman, he's still just throwing like these wide haymakers and double punches that look clunky in his big rubber suit. And I don't know what Nolan was thinking on some of that stuff, but she actually got some cool fight scenes. I thought Anne Hathaway did a great job for what the role required of her, and the dynamic with her and Bruce Wayne I thought was good. Then continuing what he did with The Dark Knight, there's several just awesome IMAX sequences in this movie. I actually saw this in a true IMAX theater the opening day at the Bob Bullock Theater here in Austin. In that opening sequence with the plane heist, rescue, kill, whatever you want to call that sequence in IMAX was pretty phenomenal. And then likewise, a bunch of the stuff in the finale where you have these huge battles going on, big chases, and massive groups of police charging at Bane's forces, all of it. You just feel the size. You can tell they actually shot this stuff. It's not all CGI. It's not green screen. He actually did practical stuff that I love to see, and one of the things that Nolan does really well. And then finally, there's a lot of really emotionally potent movies. Then finally, the movie has no shortage of very emotionally potent scenes. A lot of them tying to Alfred, who is trying to figure out what to do with Bruce Wayne, who's depressed at the beginning, reckless in the middle, and then for a little bit there at the end, he believes, he's dead and just heartbroken over it. And so when this movie needs to have a really potent punch to the gut emotional scene, it works. When this movie starts to do its final montage and where everyone lands in the final few minutes, it hits all the right notes. Christopher Nolan really knows how to land this ship with his films and just have emotional resonance and end on that high note that stirs all the emotions that you want it to do. That's one of the things he does really well. This movie is a great example of that. I just remember being in the theater as that music was swelling, and then we're at the funeral and Joseph Gordon-Levitt is researching stuff. And it's just every bit of me's like, wow, this is amazing. Like this, you're giving me the chills, the goosebumps, and just amazed at what they're able to pull off in those moments. But unfortunately, I have quite a few problems with this movie, and especially rewatching it for this review and for my ranking that I did last month. A lot of things stood out to me, so we got to move on to the bad. When it comes to the bad for this one, I think there's three big fronts on this one. The first one is that this is the movie where Nolanized Batman to a point where it really became kind of off-putting to me. That he's always put his own spin on the character, and it was a little bit in Batman Begins. It was quite a bit in The Dark Knight, and here he's just kind of telling his own story that he wants to tell, bringing in Batman-like characters and Batman-like plot lines. Second problem here is I think they really wrote themselves into a corner with Christopher Nolan's idea of how this universe would work and with what Bruce Wayne wanted and where they ended The Dark Knight on such a great note. But it put them in a really tough corner for what to do with this movie. And then the third big issue with this one is that it is, I think, the sloppiest of Christopher Nolan's scripts when it comes to just the story. There's a lot more holes. There's a lot more conveniences. There's a lot more lapses in the logic than the rest of his filmography. And a bunch of these reviews I've done, I've talked about just how tightly written it is, how well thought out it is, especially on Inception. There was just like brilliant level of complexity and explaining things in a way that you understood it and bringing it all together. And then you get to The Dark Knight Rises, and it's a big, ambitious story, but there's a lot of problems with the way some things play out. So to kind of unpack these just a little bit, I think it's a movie whose starting premise doesn't really work. They wrote themselves into a really tough corner by ending The Dark Knight with him on the run and with the Harvey Dent stuff to where there wasn't really an obvious next step. So you end up having a movie where he's been retired from being Batman for 7 years. He was only Batman for about 18 months. He takes 7 years off. So the first 45 minutes of this movie is him becoming Batman. But then they also decided to do the Nightfall storyline where Bane breaks his back. So he becomes Batman for 10 minutes, and then Bane breaks his back, and he spends the next 45 minutes becoming Batman again. And it's just a little bit weird to have a 3-hour Batman movie with this little Batman in it, as well as to have one movie where 2 different times it spends 45 minutes having Bruce Wayne become Batman for 2 different reasons. It repeats a storyline. And that just feels awfully sloppy and poorly thought out for Christopher Nolan. He's normally better at not doing things like that and not missing such an obvious thing of like, wait, we shouldn't have him become Batman twice in this movie. And in another sense, that means in the span of 3 Batman movies, he's become Batman 3 different times for 3 different reasons. And I think a big part of the problem here is built into Christopher Nolan's understanding of this version of Batman is that he doesn't want to be Batman. He wants it to end. I mean, that's built into the premise of The Dark Knight, that he's trying to retire from being Batman. He thinks Harvey Dent is the person that can do that. And then at the end of it, they prop Harvey Dent up as the way that he is able to do that, but through a lie that sets up this movie. And so this leads to a lot of problems because the concept of a Batman that doesn't want to be Batman is pretty antithetical to the source material. This is not like a recurring theme in the comic books that Batman doesn't want to be Batman, that he's looking for reasons to retire. That's not exactly the source material. And so it leads to all these kind of forced plot points and repeated plot points to where The Dark Knight, he retires, his back is broken, he stops being Batman. And then at the end of The Dark Knight Rises, he stops being Batman again because he wants to spend time with Selena Kyle. So it's just a lot of Batman not wanting to be Batman in a Batman movie. A lot of it. And that's just a very strange starting point for your Batman movie. And I think that's why you watch it and you're like, there's not much Batman movie in it, this 3-hour Batman movie. And a lot of this goes back to what I mentioned before about Christopher Nolan in this movie really departing from the source material. So you have this Bruce Wayne that gets really bummed out because Rachel died and he has to carry this burden of everybody not liking him. So he's a hermit for 7 years and stops being Batman, and he's not paying attention to the Wayne Foundation anymore, and he's not paying attention to anything kind of going on with Wayne Enterprises, so they're not making money anymore. And then when he starts, fires everything, gets everything going again, he just bangs Talia al Ghul just because, let's throw that in the movie, which is kind of a weird thing to just throw in the movie. And it just doesn't feel like comic book Bruce Wayne at all. This feels like a Christopher Nolan character that has some Bruce Wayne qualities, has a Bruce Wayne backstory, but by this point in time, this is a Nolan character. This is not really an adaptation of the comic book character of Bruce Wayne. And that's, I think, it's always sat weird with me what they did with the character. Rewatching it these days, it just definitely doesn't feel right. As a smaller, just kind of nitpick on the film, the audio mix for Bane's voice is ridiculous for this movie. And when they put the first trailers out, there was some complaints that it was kind of muffled because he's talking like this with a weird accent through a mask. And so it sounded weird. And then we had they put the first 8 minutes, the plane sequence, as an intro to Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, which I actually got to see that. I frequently in my videos talk about my favorite movie experience, and it was seeing Ghost Protocol at the IMAX and that Dubai sequence. That same day, I got to see the intro to this one 6 months before the movie came out. And there's a lot of complaints coming out of that you couldn't hear what Bane was saying because a plane is being torn to pieces, talking through a mask with an accent. And so then they overcorrected. So the version that's still on my Blu-ray that I watched, his voice is so loud and present in the mix, like he's talking directly into the mic, rather than feeling like everything else in the room. Like everyone else in the room, it sounds like they're in a room and then Bane starts talking directly into the microphone. And it just feels so close, and they overcorrected on that one. And still, every time I watch the movie, it catches me off guard because I'm like, whoa, his voice is right there in my ears. But ultimately, the thing that frustrates me about this movie is that I feel the execution does not match its ambitions. This is the movie where Christopher Nolan makes a bunch of script and story mistakes that he famously normally does not make. It's awfully sloppy for a Christopher Nolan script. It relies on coincidences, logical leaps, dangling plot lines. Bane's plot at the end of the movie is so cartoonishly over the top and contrived that it only exists really for the purpose of giving Bruce Wayne enough time to heal so he can return as Batman and save the day. There's more kind of cartoonish antics with Bruce Wayne painting a bat on a building at a point in time where he's low on time. And all of this stuff exists to give us these big, gigantic moments that felt earned in the first two movies, but just feel a lot more contrived now. Like they're working hard to do what came naturally. And so this movie, rewatching it, I still enjoy it. It still has solid moments. The high moments are just as high as the other high moments, but the lows are much lower than the other movies in this trilogy and much lower than most Christopher Nolan movies in general. He, for whatever reason, wasn't able to pull this script together and make it work the way that he's normally able to. Real quick before I give you my final score on this one, be sure to tell me what you thought down below in the comment section. Also, I've been reviewing all of his movies up to this point in time. You can check them out in this playlist right up here. I absolutely appreciate Christopher Nolan's ambition with this film and that it does close things out nicely to make for a solid trilogy with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But I do not think that Christopher Nolan's execution matched his ambitions on this one. I do think this is probably Christopher Nolan's sloppiest script that makes the most mistakes in just storytelling sense. And this is the movie where he deviated, I think, too far from the source material. Still a movie I enjoy, but a lot of frustrating elements. Overall, it's a B- on the entertainment scale. It's a 7 out of 10. You should still see this one because it's a Christopher Nolan film, and it completes the trilogy. You can check out the rest of my reviews right over there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.